Think about the last time you said something you immediately regretted. Maybe it was a heated argument where words flew out before you could catch them, or a moment of frustration that led to a careless comment. We've all been there, those instances where speaking felt natural in the moment, but silence would have been the wiser choice. It's in these everyday situations that the ancient wisdom of Stoicism offers a surprisingly modern solution: the art of knowing when to say nothing at all. This isn't about suppressing your voice or avoiding difficult conversations. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause, reflect, and choose not to respond. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most respected Stoic philosophers, wrote in his personal meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength often reveals itself not in what we say, but in what we consciously decide not to say. In a world that constantly encourages us to speak up, share our opinions, and make ourselves heard, the idea of strategic silence might seem counterintuitive. But the Stoics saw silence not as weakness or avoidance, but as a tool for clarity, discernment, and emotional mastery. When we pause before speaking, we create space to evaluate our intentions, manage our reactions, and align our words with our values rather than our impulses. This approach isn't about withdrawing from life. It's about engaging with it more thoughtfully. Through the principles of emotional regulation, purposeful action, and mindful discernment, Stoicism teaches us that well-timed silence can prevent misunderstandings, deepen relationships, and even strengthen our sense of inner peace. It's a practice that turns restraint into a form of power. In this video, we'll explore how you can apply these timeless Stoic insights to your own life. We'll break down why silence isn't just the absence of noise, but an active and intentional practice that can transform how you communicate with others and with yourself. You'll learn how to identify those critical moments where saying nothing creates more impact than speaking, how to cultivate the self-awareness needed to choose silence over reaction, and how to use pauses not as passive gaps, but as opportunities for deeper connection and understanding. This isn't about staying quiet all the time. It's about learning when your voice will truly matter, and when it's better to listen, reflect, and hold your peace. So if you've ever wondered how to respond less impulsively, communicate more effectively, and find strength in stillness, you're in the right place. Let's begin this journey into the power of purposeful silence. At the heart of this Stoic practice lies a powerful mental tool called the Discipline of Assent. In simple terms, assent is the act of giving your approval or agreement to an initial impression. Think of it as that split-second moment between something happening and you deciding what it means. For instance, when someone offers you criticism, your first impression might be a flash of anger or defensiveness. That's natural. The discipline of assent is the conscious choice to pause right there and withhold your judgment. You don't immediately agree with that initial emotional reaction. You don't let it dictate your response. Instead, you create a gap, a moment of silence in your mind, to evaluate the impression with clarity and reason. This pause is where your true power lies, because it's in that space that you decide whether an impression is true, helpful, or worth acting upon. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, who taught that our freedom depends on this very skill, famously said that we are not disturbed by events, but by the judgments we form about them. He urged his students to remember that an outside event, like a critical comment, is just an appearance. It has no inherent power to upset us until we give it that power by assenting to a negative interpretation. By withholding our immediate judgment, we strip the event of its ability to control our emotions and, consequently, our words. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about not being enslaved by every passing feeling. It's the difference between your boss sending a terse email and you immediately assenting to the thought, "He's furious with me, I'm in trouble," which leads to an anxious or defensive reply, versus pausing to consider other possibilities. "He's under a tight deadline, this isn't personal," which allows for a calm and measured response. You can see how this directly prevents reactive speech. When we assent too quickly to a negative impression, words tumble out that are often rooted in pride, fear, or insecurity. We might respond with a sharp retort, a justification, or a counter-criticism simply because we failed to question that initial, raw feeling. But when we practice withholding assent, we grant ourselves the time to choose a different path. We can ask ourselves, is this impression true? Is my reaction proportionate? Will saying this right now be useful or harmful? This momentary silence becomes an act of strength, a declaration that you are in command of your inner world. Consider a real-world scenario. You've just presented an idea at a meeting, and a colleague immediately points out a flaw in front of everyone. The first impression is a sting of embarrassment and perhaps irritation. Without the discipline of assent, you might instantly jump in to defend your idea, downplay the flaw, or even make a snippy comment about their own work. This reactive speech often escalates tension and breeds regret. Now imagine applying the Stoic pause. You feel the sting, but you consciously withhold agreement from the thought that this is a personal attack or a disaster. You take a breath, you might even say, "That's a good point, let me think about that for a moment." This silence isn't passive, it's a strategic and respectful space that allows you to process the feedback logically, respond constructively, and maintain both your composure and the collegial relationship. So let's bring this home. Can you recall a recent time when you gave your assent too quickly? A moment where a first impression of anger, hurt, or frustration took the wheel and steered you straight into words you later wished you could take back. That feeling of regret is a powerful teacher. It highlights the exact moment where a pause, a withheld judgment, could have changed the entire outcome. This self-awareness is the first step toward building this discipline into your daily life. This practice of withholding assent leads us directly to one of the most fundamental Stoic principles, the dichotomy of control. Understanding what is and isn't within your power is the very bedrock that makes strategic silence not just possible, but profoundly effective. The Stoics divided the world into two distinct categories, things within our complete control and things outside of it. What do we truly control? Our own judgments, our impulses, our desires and aversions, and most importantly for our discussion, our voluntary actions and reactions, including our choice to speak or to remain silent. Everything else, from what other people say and think to external events and outcomes, ultimately falls outside our direct command. Epictetus opens his famous handbook with this very idea, stating, "Some things are up to us and some are not up to us." He then urges his students to focus exclusively on the former and to meet the latter with acceptance. When we grasp this distinction, the power of silence becomes clear. Every word we speak requires energy, mental, emotional, and even physical. Wasting that precious energy on things outside our control is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. It's a futile effort that leaves us drained and frustrated. How many times have we exhausted ourselves arguing with someone who has already made up their mind, complaining about a situation we cannot change, or trying to manage another person's perception of us? These are all attempts to control the uncontrollable, and our words become the vehicle for that futile effort. Silence in these contexts is not a passive surrender, it's an active conservation of energy. It's the conscious decision to redirect your finite resources away from external battles you cannot win and toward the internal fortress you can always strengthen. Consider the modern arena of social media. You post a thoughtful comment and someone replies with a harsh, dismissive, or blatantly illogical retort. The initial impulse is to fire back, to correct them, to defend your position and win the argument. But here's the Stoic question: is their response within your control? Absolutely not. You control posting your original comment, but you have zero control over how another person chooses to interpret it or react to it. Engaging in a back-and-forth debate is an attempt to control their opinion, their attitude, and their keyboard, a perfect recipe for frustration. The strategic Stoic response is often to say nothing after the initial point has been made. This silence preserves your peace of mind, protects your time, and prevents you from being drawn into a conflict that cannot be won. Your energy remains yours to invest in something you can actually influence. This principle applies just as powerfully in face-to-face interactions. Imagine your coworker constantly makes cynical remarks about management's decisions. You could engage every time, offering counterpoints and trying to argue them into a more positive outlook, but their attitude is their own. It's outside your control. Your continual engagement wastes your breath and often leaves you feeling negative by association. A Stoic approach might involve listening once, perhaps offering a single, reasoned perspective, and then choosing silence thereafter. This isn't approval, it's a boundary. You refuse to expend your words and emotional energy on a recurring complaint that you cannot fix. You conserve your power for your own work and your own reasoned judgments. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Can you identify areas where you consistently waste words on things outside your control? Perhaps it's trying to convince a family member to see politics your way, or arguing with a customer service representative about a company policy they didn't create. We often speak because we feel the urge to be heard or to change an external circumstance, not because our words will have any real effect. The Stoic practice is to pause and perform a quick control check before you speak. Ask yourself, is what I'm about to say aimed at something within my control? If the answer is no, then often the most powerful and wise course of action is to conserve your energy and embrace a purposeful, potent silence. Now let's bring this concept of control into a practical, everyday habit that you can start using immediately: the simple yet transformative power of the pause. This is where Stoic philosophy moves from theory to action. It's the physical application of withholding assent and respecting the dichotomy of control. The Roman philosopher Seneca, a master of language and rhetoric, offered timeless advice on this. He wrote, "I shall never be ashamed of citing a bad author if the line is good." And one line he lived by was this: speak only when you are certain, and then be brief. This wasn't about being a man of few words for its own sake. It was about measuring your words because each one carries weight and consequence. The mechanism for this measurement is the deliberate pause. A deliberate pause is that intentional gap you create between receiving a stimulus and crafting your response. It's the conscious decision to hit the mental mute button for a few seconds. In that brief silence, you accomplish something extraordinary. You shift the entire conversation from the reactive, emotional part of your brain, the amygdala, which is all about fight or flight, to the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thought, discernment, and long-term planning. Without the pause, you are essentially on autopilot, saying what you've always said, reacting how you've always reacted. With the pause, you take back the controls. You become the pilot of your speech rather than a passenger to your impulses. Consider a scenario that probably feels familiar. You're having a discussion with your partner or a close family member, and a topic arises that you both feel passionately about. Maybe it's finances, parenting styles, or household responsibilities. The conversation starts calmly but begins to heat up. They say something that feels like a personal criticism or an unfair accusation. Your body tenses, your heart rate jumps, and the words are right there on your tongue, poised to fire back with equal force. This is the critical juncture. The autopilot reaction is to interrupt, defend, and escalate. The Stoic response is to take a slow, deliberate breath. To create that space, in that 5-second pause, you give yourself the opportunity to ask a few vital questions. Is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Will it help the situation or just help me vent my frustration? That tiny window of silence can completely change the trajectory of an entire evening or even a relationship. Instead of lashing out with, "You always blame me for everything, you never help out anyway," which only deepens the conflict, the pause allows you to respond with something like, "I hear that you're feeling frustrated about this. Can you help me understand why this is coming up now?" This isn't about winning the argument, it's about understanding the person. It transforms a potential battle into a potential dialogue. The pause is the tool that makes that transformation possible. Think about the last difficult conversation you had. Can you pinpoint the exact moment where things started to go off the rails? Chances are it was a split-second decision to speak without pausing. Now, imagine rewinding that moment and inserting just 5 seconds of silence. What would you have done differently? What different words might you have chosen? How might the other person have responded to a calmer, more collected version of you? That's the power you hold. It doesn't require memorizing complex philosophy. It just requires remembering to breathe before you speak. This practice turns Stoic wisdom from an ancient concept into a living, breathing part of your daily interactions, creating more peace and less regret one conversation at a time. This practice of thoughtful speech extends directly to one of the most common and corrosive forms of communication, gossip. The Stoics viewed idle talk not as a harmless pastime, but as a significant drain on our moral and mental resources. Marcus Aurelius, even as the most powerful man in the Roman world, constantly reminded himself to avoid trivialities. In his meditations, he wrote, "You need to avoid certain things in your train of thought, everything random, everything irrelevant, and certainly everything self-important or malicious." He saw chatter and gossip as distractions from a life of purpose, pulling us away from our own work and into the drama of others' lives. For the Stoics, every word should have a purpose: to inform, to improve, to connect meaningfully. Speech that serves none of these aims is at best a waste of your finite energy, and at worst, a poison that erodes your character and your relationships. When we engage in gossip, we aren't just sharing information. We are often trading in judgments and assumptions about things far outside our control. We speculate on someone's motives, we dissect their personal choices, and we pass along second-hand stories that may not even be true. This activity directly violates the dichotomy of control we just discussed. We are investing our mental focus and emotional energy into the private lives and reputations of others, realms where we have no business and no authority. This doesn't just drain our focus, it actively damages our own character. Each time we participate, we train ourselves to be people who find entertainment in the misfortunes or missteps of others, rather than focusing on our own progress and virtues. It cultivates a critical and judgmental mindset that inevitably turns inward, making us more anxious about how others might be talking about us. The Roman philosopher Seneca provides a powerful historical example of this principle in action. As a tutor and advisor to the young Emperor Nero, Seneca was positioned at the very heart of power, surrounded by the most intense court intrigues, plots, and whispers imaginable. His letters reveal a man who understood that survival and integrity in such a toxic environment depended on mastering his tongue. He consciously chose to avoid engaging in the palace gossip, not because he was ignorant of it, but because he knew that participating would muddy his own judgment, align him with factions, and distract him from his duty to provide clear-minded counsel. He withdrew not from his responsibilities, but from the frivolous and malicious speech that consumed everyone around him. This strategic silence was a key part of his philosophy, allowing him to maintain his clarity and moral compass in a world designed to corrupt both. You can observe this dynamic in any modern workplace or social group. Think about the energy in a room after a gossip session ends. It often leaves a subtle residue of guilt, anxiety, and negativity. Contrast that with the feeling after a conversation where you discussed a new idea, solved a problem, or offered genuine support to someone. One conversation drains your energy and divides people. The other builds energy and connection. The Stoic question is always, which type of conversation aligns with the person you want to become? Gossip might feel like a way to bond with others, but it typically builds bonds based on negativity and exclusion, which are fragile and ultimately unsatisfying. So how do we put this into practice? It begins with a simple but powerful audit of your own conversations. For the next few days, make a conscious effort to observe the nature of your speech. You don't need to judge every word harshly, but simply bring awareness. Notice the topics that come up. How much of your talk is focused on your own projects, ideas, and observations? How much is focused on other people's lives, especially in a speculative or judgmental way? When someone else brings up a piece of gossip, observe your impulse. The automatic reaction is often to lean in and contribute. The Stoic response is to pause and then to gently steer the conversation elsewhere, or to simply listen without adding fuel to the fire. You might change the subject by asking a question about the speaker's own experience. That reminds me, how is your project going? Or you might offer a more charitable interpretation of the person being discussed. This isn't about being self-righteous. It's about actively choosing to build a more substantive and positive environment with your words. By cleansing your speech of the frivolous and the malicious, you create more space for communication that is truly useful, kind, and aligned with your highest self. This idea of silence as a shield takes the Stoic pause and elevates it from a simple tool to a form of protective armor for your mind. Remember the core teaching from Epictetus. People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. A provocation in itself has no power. It's just words or actions. The power comes from our opinion of it, our decision to be offended, our choice to view it as a threat that demands a response. Silence in this context is the ultimate refusal to grant that power. It is the conscious act of not forming a damaging opinion in the first place, of not handing over your inner peace to someone else's behavior. By choosing not to engage, you are not running away. You are actively defending your mental fortress. You are declaring that your tranquility is not for sale at the price of a petty argument. Think of it like this: if someone hurls an insult at you and you catch it, examine it, and then choose to be hurt by it, you have essentially accepted their gift of negativity. But if they hurl an insult and you simply let it fall to the ground, ignored and unanswered, the intended harm remains with them. Your silence is the shield that deflects the blow. This is incredibly potent in our modern world of online interactions. An internet troll's entire goal is to provoke a reaction, to get a rise out of you, to drag you into a meaningless, energy-draining conflict. The moment you reply, even with a well-reasoned counter-argument, the troll wins. You have played their game on their field, but when you respond with silence, you achieve total victory. You reveal their provocation as powerless, and you retain all of your energy and composure. You have used silence not to hide, but to demonstrate an unshakable strength that no amount of provocation can penetrate. This principle applies just as effectively to the subtle, passive-aggressive comments we encounter in daily life. A coworker might make a backhanded compliment about your presentation, or a family member might offer an unsolicited critique of your life choices wrapped in a thin veil of concern. Our instinct is often to correct the record, to justify ourselves, to prove them wrong, but this instinct pulls us onto a battlefield we never chose. Stoic silence allows you to simply not show up to that fight. You can acknowledge the comment with a simple, non-committal "I see," or even just a nod and a change of subject. This isn't weakness, it's a strategic disengagement. You are protecting your focus and your emotional energy for the things that truly matter, rather than spending it on skirmishes over petty opinions. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague takes credit for an idea you proposed earlier. The immediate surge of indignation is natural. The undisciplined reaction might be to interrupt and publicly claim ownership, creating an awkward scene and potentially damaging the professional relationship. But the Stoic, armed with silence as a shield, would pause. They would assess the situation not just through the lens of fairness, but through the lens of control and long-term goal. Is my primary goal here to receive credit in this moment, or is it to see this project succeed? Will speaking up right now serve the larger purpose or just my wounded pride? Often, the most powerful move is to say nothing in the meeting, but to later have a private, calm conversation with that colleague or with your manager. The public silence protected the team's harmony and your own professional demeanor, while the private action addressed the issue directly and effectively. The shield protected you from a reactive mistake, allowing for a more strategic and virtuous response. So let's bring this back to your own experience. How could this kind of intentional silence serve as your personal shield against the daily irritations that life throws your way? The next time you feel that familiar heat of frustration, be it from a rude driver, a demanding email, or a snippy comment from a stranger, pause and see the situation through the eyes of Epictetus. The event itself is neutral. Your power lies in the opinion you form about it. Can you choose to see the comment as a reflection of the other person's bad day rather than a personal attack? Can you view the provocation as a test of your own character, an opportunity to practice the very virtue of patience you wish to cultivate? In that space, your silence becomes an active, powerful choice. It is the armor you wear to walk through the world undisturbed, not because the world is less chaotic, but because you have mastered the art of building an inner citadel that no external noise can breach. This deep, protective silence we use as a shield against external provocation naturally cultivates something even more profound, a lasting inner stillness. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire of constant noise and demand, wrote extensively about finding a quiet citadel within the mind. He said, "People look for retreats for themselves in the country, by the coast, or in the hills, but this is altogether unphilosophical when you can at any moment retreat into yourself. Nowhere can a person find a retreat more full of peace or more free from trouble than in his own soul." This is the ultimate goal of Stoic silence. It's not just about managing external conversations. It's about building an internal sanctuary that remains undisturbed regardless of the chaos around you. Every time we choose not to engage in frivolous talk or reactive speech, we are actively strengthening that inner retreat. We are declaring that our peace is an internal project, not something dependent on external quiet. Think of your mind as a clear pool of water. Every time we speak without thinking, every time we engage in gossip or a heated argument, it's like tossing a handful of pebbles into that water. The surface becomes choppy, cloudy, and agitated, making it impossible to see the bottom clearly. But when we practice intentional silence, we stop throwing pebbles. The water is allowed to settle, the sediment of distraction and emotional reactivity slowly sinks, and what remains is a profound clarity. In that stillness, we can finally see our own thoughts and values with sharp definition. We can distinguish between what is truly important and what is merely noisy distraction. This mental clarity is the fertile ground from which wise decisions and purposeful action can grow. It's the difference between reacting to life from a place of turbulence and responding to it from a place of calm discernment. You can begin cultivating this stillness in very practical ways, starting with just a few minutes of intentional quiet each day. This isn't about achieving a perfectly empty mind through advanced meditation, though that can be a valuable practice. It's much simpler. It could mean sitting with your morning coffee in complete silence instead of immediately reaching for your phone to scroll through the news. It might involve taking a 5-minute walk without headphones, simply observing the world around you without the need to comment on it, even internally. During your workday, you could build in a moment of pause between meetings just 60 seconds to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and allow the mental chatter from the previous conversation to settle before you engage in the next one. These are small acts of silence that act like weights, gently holding down the flaps of your mental tent so it isn't blown into chaos by every gust of wind. The beauty of this practice is that it creates a positive feedback loop. The more you practice these small moments of outer silence, the more you strengthen your inner stillness. And the stronger that inner stillness becomes, the easier it is to access the discipline of assent and the power of the pause in the heat of the moment. You're not trying to force yourself to be quiet. You are building a reservoir of calm that you can draw from when you need it most. When a provocation arises, you'll find it easier to access that still pool within yourself instead of immediately reacting from the turbulent surface. You train your default setting to shift from reactivity to mindful observation. This is how Stoic silence transforms from a communication strategy into a way of being, offering a sense of peace that isn't fragile or circumstantial, but resilient and deeply your own. This practice of cultivating inner stillness brings us to one of the most active and engaged forms of silence, the art of deep listening. The Stoics placed immense value on listening, not as a passive waiting for your turn to talk, but as a profound and productive practice in its own right. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and became a revered teacher, understood that the path to wisdom begins with the humility to learn from others. He advised his students, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This wasn't just a cute saying, it was a core tenet of his philosophy. True listening requires us to set aside our own ego, our desire to be right, and our urge to assert our own perspective. It is a voluntary act of silence where we intentionally create space to absorb, understand, and learn from the world outside our own mind. In a culture that often rewards the loudest voice in the room, this Stoic approach to listening is a revolutionary act. It reframes silence from a mere absence of speech into an active, focused attention. When we truly listen, we are doing far more than just processing sound waves. We are seeking to understand the other person's character, their reasoning, and their experience. We are gathering valuable data about the world that we can then use to form better, more informed judgments, which is the ultimate Stoic goal. This kind of listening is impossible if we are internally rehearsing our rebuttal, judging their every word, or simply waiting for a pause to jump in. It requires the full application of the discipline of assent, withholding our own judgments long enough to fully comprehend theirs. It is an exercise in empathy and intellectual humility, where we temporarily surrender our own agenda to truly connect with another's reality. Consider a typical business meeting where a new strategy is being discussed. The common dynamic is that everyone is partially listening, but primarily thinking about how they will contribute to the conversation to demonstrate their own value and expertise. The result is often a series of disjointed monologues rather than a true dialogue. Now, imagine applying a Stoic approach. Instead of formulating your point while others are talking, you commit to full, attentive silence. You listen not just to the words, but to the concerns behind them, the logic within them, and the potential flaws they might reveal. By withholding your immediate response, you might actually hear a critical piece of information you would have otherwise missed. Your eventual contribution, when you do speak, will be infinitely more valuable because it won't be a reflexive opinion. It will be a considered response that synthesizes the entire conversation, addresses the core issues raised, and moves the discussion forward constructively. This principle transforms personal relationships just as powerfully. Imagine a friend is sharing a problem with you. The instinctual response is often to immediately offer advice, to share a similar story from our own life, or to try to solve their issue for them. But the Stoic art of listening asks us to resist that impulse. The most powerful support you can often offer is not a solution, but a silent, attentive presence that makes the other person feel truly heard and understood. By simply listening without rushing to fix or judge, you create a container for their experience. This act of quiet empathy often does more to help them find their own clarity than any advice ever could. It's in that space of non-judgmental silence that real connection and trust are built. So, take a moment to reflect on your own conversations. Can you recall a time when you chose to listen deeply and in doing so, learned something that speaking would have never revealed? Perhaps it was when you finally stopped offering your teenager solutions and just listened, discovering the real anxiety beneath their frustration. Or maybe it was during a disagreement with your partner, when you made the conscious choice to understand their point of view fully before defending your own, and in that understanding found the real root of the conflict. These moments reveal that listening is not a passive withdrawal. It is an active and generous gift we give to others. It is the practical application of Stoic virtue, exercising justice by giving others their due attention, practicing wisdom by seeking to learn, and demonstrating courage by quieting our own ego. In the end, the wisdom we gain from listening often becomes the most powerful thing we eventually have to say. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher who served as an advisor to the Emperor Nero, had a great deal to say about anger, and he pinpointed our speech as one of its primary fuels. He wrote that anger is a temporary madness, a fire that quickly burns out of control, and our words are the kindling we throw onto the flames. He observed that in the heat of an argument, we often say things not to resolve the issue, but to hurt the other person, to win the moment, to inflict a wound that matches our own. This is speech at its most destructive. It's no longer about communication, but about retaliation. And once those words are out, they cannot be taken back. They hang in the air, changing the entire nature of the conflict from a simple disagreement over a fact or an action into a personal battle where pride and pain become the main characters. Think about a common domestic scenario. A couple is getting ready for a dinner party. One person is running late, feeling stressed and rushed. The other, who is ready, makes an offhand comment like, "You're always so disorganized. We're going to be late because of you again." That first sentence is the spark. It's not a neutral observation. It's a global criticism, an attack on character. The natural human reaction is to defend oneself, and so the stressed partner might fire back with, "Well, if you helped instead of just standing there criticizing, maybe we'd be on time." Now the spark has found its kindling. The original stress about being late is completely forgotten, replaced by a new, more volatile conflict about respect, fairness, and personal character. The conversation is no longer about leaving the house. It's about proving a point, defending territory, and hurting back. Each subsequent sentence adds more fuel until a simple time management issue has exploded into a full-blown argument that could leave a lasting emotional residue. Now let's rewind that scenario and apply the Stoic pause. The first comment is made, "You're always so disorganized." This is the critical juncture. This is the moment where the discipline of assent must be deployed. The partner on the receiving end feels the sting, the flush of anger, the immediate compulsion to retaliate. But instead of assenting to that initial impression of being attacked, they take a breath. They create a moment of silence. In that space, they might recognize that the comment is likely born of their partner's own anxiety about social punctuality, not a genuine indictment of their entire character. The Stoic response born from that silence might be to say, "I know you're worried about being late and I'm stressed too. I'm moving as fast as I can. Could you please grab my keys for me?" This response does three things. It acknowledges the other person's underlying emotion, worry. It states your own reality, stress, and it offers a collaborative solution, grabbing the keys. It completely disarms the personal attack by refusing to engage on that level. The kindling remains dry, the spark fizzles out, and the conflict is de-escalated before it ever truly begins. This is the profound power of strategic silence in the face of provocation. It acts as a circuit breaker, stopping the rapid, uncontrollable flow of angry energy. By choosing not to respond in kind, you refuse to become a co-author of the conflict. You stop the script from following its predictable, painful trajectory. Your silence or your chosen words of de-escalation become a bucket of cold water on the nascent fire. It takes immense strength to do this because every fiber of our being wants to fight back when we feel wrong. But the Stoic asks a more important question than, "How can I win this argument?" They ask, "What is the virtuous outcome here? What will preserve my character and the health of this relationship?" So, bring this concept into your own life for a moment. Cast your mind back over the last week. Can you identify a single conflict, large or small, that was made worse by the words that were spoken? It might have been a tense exchange with a coworker that started over a missed email but quickly spiraled into comments about competence. It might have been a debate with a friend about something trivial that became heated because neither of you would stop talking to truly listen. In that memory, can you pinpoint the exact sentence you said that you wish you could take back, the one that crossed the line from stating your case into causing harm? That feeling of regret is your greatest teacher. It highlights the precise moment where a choice for silence could have changed everything. It reminds us that often the most powerful way to win an argument is to refuse to have won in the first place and to instead seek understanding. This practice of restraint in heated moments is deeply connected to a broader Stoic virtue known as temperance or moderation. While we often think of temperance in terms of food or drink, the Stoics applied it with equal force to our speech. The Roman teacher Musonius Rufus, a major influence on Epictetus, put it plainly: we should not speak too much and should say only what is necessary. This isn't a call for absolute quiet, but for a mindful economy of words. It's the understanding that just as we can overindulge at a meal, we can overindulge in conversation, filling the air with unnecessary noise that dilutes our meaning and wastes our energy. Temperance in speech means asking ourselves a simple but powerful question before we speak. Is this truly necessary? Over-talking, or feeling compelled to fill every silence often stems from a lack of inner self-control. It can be driven by anxiety, a need for validation, or the fear of being perceived as uninformed or disengaged. We might interrupt someone not because we have a vital point to add, but because we're worried we'll forget our thought or we're eager to prove our own intelligence. We might dominate a discussion because we haven't learned to be comfortable with quiet moments. In Stoic terms, this is a failure of discipline. We are allowing external pressures, the desire for approval, the fear of irrelevance, to govern our actions instead of our own reasoned choice. Each unnecessary word is a small leak of our focus and composure. A powerful modern parallel for cultivating this virtue is the conscious effort to reduce interruptions in conversations. Think about your last group discussion. How often did you find yourself half listening to the current speaker while mentally preparing your own point, just waiting for the slightest pause to jump in? This common habit is the antithesis of Stoic temperance. It places the value of being heard above the value of understanding, and it often derails the natural flow of ideas. The temperate approach is to let the other person finish completely. It requires actively quieting that internal urge to interject, creating a space where their thought can land fully before you offer your own. This single act of restraint transforms a chaotic exchange of monologues into a true dialogue and demonstrates immense respect for the other person. This virtue extends far beyond formal conversations into our daily habits. Consider the compulsion to constantly voice every minor complaint or observation throughout the day. While sharing experiences is part of connection, a lack of temperance can turn this into a relentless stream of negativity or triviality that drains both the speaker and the listener. The Stoic practice involves pausing to assess the value of your contribution. Is mentioning that the coffee is lukewarm going to improve the situation or simply spread a minor irritation? Is recounting every detail of a frustrating commute adding anything meaningful to the conversation, or is it merely rehashing an event you cannot change? Temperance asks us to filter our speech through the sieve of necessity and usefulness. Take a moment to turn this lens inward. Can you identify areas in your own life where your speech consistently exceeds what is necessary? Perhaps it's in meetings where you feel pressure to contribute frequently and end up speaking just to be seen participating. Maybe it's with your family, where familiar patterns lead to repeating the same stories or criticisms long after they've served any purpose. It could even be in your internal dialogue, where a lack of mental temperance allows anxious or self-critical thoughts to run unchecked. The goal isn't to become a silent observer of your own life, but to become a more intentional participant. By practicing temperance, we ensure that when we do choose to speak, our words carry greater weight, clarity, and purpose because they haven't been diluted by everything we didn't need to say. This practice of temperance leads us directly into one of the most powerful and practical Stoic disciplines, the art of reserving judgment. Epictetus, who placed this concept at the very core of his teachings, urged his students to remember that impressions, the initial thoughts that pop into our heads about any situation, are not facts. They are merely suggestions, and we have the ultimate power to either accept them or reject them. He famously said, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me put you to the test." This act of pausing to test an impression before we agree with it is the essence of reserving judgment. It is the mental silence we create before forming an opinion, a silence that protects us from a cascade of errors, many of which are expressed through our speech. When we form a hasty judgment, we are essentially building a flimsy foundation for our subsequent words and actions. We see a coworker leaving early and instantly judge them as lazy. We receive a brief, blunt text message and immediately judge the sender as angry with us. We hear a piece of office gossip and instantly judge a colleague as incompetent. These snap judgments feel true in the moment because our brains are wired to fill in gaps with assumptions, but they are often wildly inaccurate. The real trouble begins when we then speak from that unverified assumption. We might make a sarcastic comment to the lazy coworker, send a defensive reply to the angry texter, or start treating the incompetent colleague with unwarranted suspicion. Our words based on a faulty judgment create real-world consequences, misunderstandings, damaged trust, and unnecessary conflict, all because we skipped that crucial step of verification. Consider a common modern scenario. You're in a team meeting and a normally quiet colleague suddenly challenges your proposal with what feels like sharp criticism. The initial impression is one of threat and hostility. Your ego feels attacked. The undisciplined mind immediately assents to this impression, forming the judgment. She's trying to undermine me in front of everyone. From that judgment, words quickly follow. You might respond with a defensive tone, dismiss her points, or even counterattack with a criticism of your own. The meeting becomes a tense battleground. Now imagine applying the Stoic pause. You feel the sting of the challenge, but you consciously withhold your judgment. You create a moment of internal silence. Instead of assenting to, "She's undermining me," you simply observe the data. She is offering a strong critique. In that space, you can get curious. You might ask her a clarifying question. "I appreciate you pushing on this. Can you help me understand your specific concern about the timeline?" This response, born from suspended judgment, often reveals that her sharp tone came from a place of concern for the project's success, not a personal attack. You transform a potential conflict into a productive collaboration simply by refusing to agree with your first impression. This habit of reserving judgment is perhaps most critical in how we perceive others' intentions. We are quick to assign motive, and we are usually wrong. A friend who doesn't return your call becomes inconsiderate. A partner who forgets to run an errand becomes unreliable. These global, negative judgments about someone's character, formed in an instant, become filters through which we then interpret all their future actions and choose our words accordingly. We speak to the inconsiderate friend with passive aggression. We nag the unreliable partner with an air of superiority. We create a reality based on our unverified opinion. The Stoic alternative is to consciously suspend that final verdict. Instead of judging them as inconsiderate, we could hold the more neutral and charitable impression. They are very busy and likely forgot. This isn't about making excuses for others. It's about refusing to pollute your own mind with a negative certainty that you cannot prove. It allows you to interact with them based on their actual next action, not the story you've already written about them. So let's turn this inward. How often do you speak before you truly understand? Can you recall a recent conversation where your words were based more on a snap judgment than on verified fact? That feeling of regret or embarrassment that often follows is a clear signal that the discipline of assent was bypassed. The goal is to become more aware of that internal trigger, that moment when an impression first lands and your mind wants to instantly categorize it as good or bad. That is your cue to create a moment of silence, to literally tell yourself, "I withhold judgment, let me gather more information." This tiny shift is where philosophical theory becomes life-changing practice. It is the difference between being a reactor, blown about by every initial impression, and being an actor who chooses their responses with wisdom and clarity. By mastering this, we ensure that our words are built on a foundation of reason, not reaction, and that is how we speak with true power and minimal regret. Now let's consider the other side of the spectrum, not how we react to criticism or conflict, but how we respond to something that can be just as perilous: praise and flattery. The Stoic approach to handling compliments might seem counterintuitive in a world that encourages us to soak up admiration, but it is every bit as strategic and integrity-preserving as silence in the face of provocation. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the emperor of Rome and receiving near-constant adulation, consistently warned himself against the seductive pull of external validation. In his private journal, he wrote, "How quickly all things disappear, in the universe the bodies themselves, but in time the remembrance of them. What is it to be praised by others?" He saw fame and praise as fleeting, unreliable, and ultimately outside his control, and therefore unworthy of being the foundation upon which he built his self-worth. When someone offers us praise, our instinct is often to eagerly accept it, to let it bolster our ego, and to perhaps even offer a reciprocal compliment to keep the positive energy flowing. But the Stoics caution against this reactive acceptance. Why? Because basing your sense of worth on the approval of others hands over control of your inner state to the whims of external opinion. It makes you vulnerable. If you become dependent on praise to feel good about yourself, you will inevitably feel crushed when criticism or indifference comes your way, which it always will. The person who is overjoyed by flattery today will be disproportionately wounded by an insult tomorrow. This emotional roller coaster is the exact opposite of the steady, resilient tranquility the Stoics sought to cultivate. Imagine this scenario. You've just led a major project at work that concluded with tremendous success. In a team meeting, your manager singles you out for effusive praise, highlighting your leadership and innovation as the primary reasons for the win. The natural, gratifying impulse is to smile broadly, thank them, and perhaps even elaborate on the challenges you overcame. But let's apply a Stoic lens. First, you practice the discipline of assent. You notice the pleasant feeling of the compliment, but you withhold full agreement from the thought that your entire value is now confirmed by this praise. You recognize that while the praise is kind, it is an external event outside your control. The project's success was likely due to a combination of factors: your effort, certainly, but also the contributions of your team, favorable market conditions, and a dose of plain luck. To reactively accept all the credit would be to ignore this complex reality and potentially damage team morale. The Stoic response is not to reject the praise rudely or to feign false humility. It is to accept it graciously and briefly, and then to consciously redirect the focus toward the collective effort. A response grounded in this philosophy might sound like, "Thank you, I appreciate you saying that. I was really proud of how the entire team came together on this. Sarah's analysis was crucial, and Mark's relentless execution made all the difference." This accomplishes several things. It acknowledges the compliment without letting it define you. It reinforces truth by sharing credit accurately. And most importantly, it demonstrates that your internal scoreboard is not kept by external validation, but by your own knowledge of what truly happened. You remain the author of your own self-assessment. This practice is about maintaining your integrity. When we lap up undue praise, we quietly accept a false narrative about ourselves and our achievements. We start to believe our own press, which creates a fragile ego that must constantly be defended and fed. By choosing a more measured, silent, or redirecting response to flattery, we protect ourselves from that inflation. We stay grounded in the reality of our own efforts and virtues, not the exaggerated version that others might present. We are also practicing justice, giving rightful credit to others, and temperance, moderating our own desire for recognition. Think about the last time you received high praise. Did you accept it fully, letting it swell your sense of self-importance? Or did you hold it lightly, appreciating the kindness behind it while maintaining a clear-eyed view of your actual contribution? There is a profound freedom in learning to meet both praise and criticism with the same steady internal silence. It means that no one else holds the remote control to your self-worth. Your value comes from living in accordance with your own virtues, from doing the right thing, whether anyone is watching and applauding or not. This is the unshakable core that Stoic silence helps to build, making you immune to the addictive highs of flattery and the devastating lows of blame. This brings us to one of the most empowering applications of Stoic silence: choosing not to respond to an insult. In the modern world, we're often taught that not fighting back is a sign of weakness, that we must defend our honor and stand up for ourselves. But the Stoics flipped this entire concept on its head. They proposed that our true honor isn't determined by how we react to others, but by how we govern ourselves. Not responding to an insult, therefore, isn't a passive act of surrender. It's an active demonstration of immense inner strength. It is, in a very real sense, a Stoic superpower. The philosopher Epictetus, who knew a great deal about being on the receiving end of harsh treatment from his time in slavery, laid out this principle with stunning clarity. He said, "Remember that it is not the person who insults you or attacks you who insults you or attacks you, but the view you take of these things as being insulting or attacking you." He's pointing directly to the discipline of assent. An insult is just a collection of sounds or words. It has no inherent power to harm you. The harm only occurs the moment you consent to be harmed by it, the moment you agree with the insult's assessment and make it a part of your own story. Think of it like this: if someone hands you a gift and you refuse to accept it, to whom does the gift belong? It remains with the giver. An insult operates on the exact same principle. When someone hurls an insult at you, they are essentially offering you a gift of negativity. If you refuse to accept it, if you simply let their words hang in the air without taking possession of them, the insult and all the negative energy it carries remains entirely with them. You haven't been harmed because you never took delivery. Your silence is the ultimate refusal to accept that toxic package. This is why Epictetus could confidently state that an insult cannot truly harm you unless you consent to it. Your power lies entirely in that moment of choice. By not engaging, you reveal the insult as powerless. You demonstrate that your self-worth is not a commodity that can be devalued by someone else's opinion. Your value is an internal fact, not an external negotiation. We can find a powerful historical example of this superpower in action with Socrates, the philosophical forefather of Stoicism. Throughout his life, and especially during his trial, Socrates faced relentless ridicule and personal attacks. He was called a corrupter of youth, a man who made the weaker argument appear the stronger, and was constantly mocked for his unconventional appearance and relentless questioning. Yet the historical accounts, particularly from his student Plato, consistently portray a man of profound calm. He never became flustered or angry in the face of these insults. Instead, he would often respond with gentle humor or more probing questions, utterly refusing to play by his accuser's rules. His composure wasn't a lack of feeling. It was the ultimate display of his philosophy. He had so thoroughly internalized his own values that the petty opinions of others simply could not reach him. His silence in the face of mockery wasn't weakness. It was the quiet, unassailable strength of a man who knew his own soul and could not be shaken by external noise. Now, let's translate this ancient superpower into your modern life. Imagine you're driving and someone cuts you off, then gestures angrily at you. The automatic reaction is to lay on the horn, gesture back, or shout something you'll never be heard. But what does that accomplish? It escalates a moment of bad driving into a potential road rage incident. flooding your own system with stress hormones and putting you in danger, all to win a confrontation with a stranger you'll never see again. The Stoic application of silence is to simply not acknowledge the insult. You take a breath, let the gesture go, and continue driving safely. You have not consented to their anger, you have protected your own peace. Or consider the digital arena. You post a comment online and receive a reply that is purely ad hominem, a personal attack on your intelligence or character with no substance. The overwhelming urge is to fire back a witty retort to put them in their place to prove you're smarter, but this is the trap. By replying, you have consented to engage on their level. You have validated their attempt to provoke you. The truly powerful move is to not reply at all. Your silence is deafening. It communicates that their opinion is so irrelevant it doesn't even warrant a response. You haven't lost the argument. You've demonstrated that there was never an argument worth having to begin with. You've conserved your energy for conversations that actually matter. So ask yourself this crucial question: what power do you actually gain by not acknowledging an insult? You gain the power of unshakable composure. You gain the power of preserved energy, which you can then redirect toward your own goals and well-being. You gain the power of time, not wasting a single second of your life on someone who doesn't deserve it. Most importantly, you gain the power of self-definition. You reaffirm that you, and you alone, are the final authority on your own character and worth. Every time you choose silence over a reactive counter-insult, you are not losing a battle. You are winning the much larger war for your own peace of mind. You are building an inner citadel so strong that no external barrage of words can ever hope to breach its walls. This brings us to a crucial dimension of Stoic silence that moves beyond simply what we say or don't say, and into the sophisticated realm of when. The ancient Greeks had a powerful concept for this, kairos. While chronos refers to chronological, linear time, the ticking of the clock kairos signifies the opportune moment, the right time for action, the critical window where a single word or a chosen silence can have maximum impact. The Stoics, with their profound understanding of human nature, deeply embraced this idea. They recognized that wisdom isn't just about knowing what is right, but also about discerning the most fitting moment to express it. A truth spoken at the wrong time is often worse than a lie. A well-intentioned piece of advice offered in the heat of anger is received as criticism. A moment of comfort given too late loses its healing power. Strategic silence, therefore, is often the most powerful expression of kairos, a conscious, patient waiting for the moment when your words will actually be heard. Seneca, the master of rhetoric and letter writing, was particularly insightful on this point. He argued that the circumstance surrounding speech is just as important as the content of the speech itself. He advised that we must be like skilled sailors, constantly reading the wind and the waves before deciding to set sail. You wouldn't launch a boat into a hurricane, so why would you launch a difficult conversation into a storm of emotion? In his moral letters, he emphasizes that a wise person considers the state of the listener, the environment, and their own emotional readiness before speaking. He wrote, "Speech that benefits the hearers has its own time and place." This means that sometimes the most beneficial thing you can do is to hold your peace, to let the emotional winds die down, and to wait for the calm waters that will allow your words to travel true to their destination. Consider the delicate art of giving advice, especially to someone you care about. You see a friend making a decision you believe is misguided. The impulsive, untrained reaction is to immediately interject with your concern, to list all the reasons why their path is flawed. This is Chronos talking. It's the urge to act now, but the Stoic, mindful of kairos, would pause. They would ask, is my friend in a mental state to receive this? Are they feeling defensive, stressed, or emotionally raw? Is this crowded restaurant the right place for a sensitive discussion? Often, the answers to these questions point toward silence in the immediate moment. The wiser course is to offer your supportive presence first, to listen, and to store your advice for a later, quieter moment when their mind is more open and receptive. Your silence in the initial instance isn't a withdrawal of care, it's the highest form of it. It's choosing the long-term effectiveness of your help over the short-term satisfaction of voicing your opinion. We can see this principle play out in professional settings with equal force. Imagine a project has just failed, the team is demoralized, and the manager is visibly frustrated. This is a kairos moment. The untrained leader might immediately launch into a critique, pointing out the errors that led to the failure. But a leader versed in Stoic timing would understand that this is a moment for supportive silence and perhaps a simple statement of solidarity. That was a tough outcome, but I know we all gave it our best. Let's regroup when we've had a chance to process this. The detailed post-mortem analysis, the valuable lessons to be learned, will have far more impact tomorrow after emotions have settled than they would in the raw minutes following a defeat. The well-timed silence after a failure builds trust and psychological safety. The ill-timed lecture breeds resentment and fear. Now take a moment to reflect on your own life. Can you recall a situation where your words, however true or well-intentioned, landed with a thud because the timing was completely wrong? Perhaps you tried to offer constructive criticism to a partner right as they walked in the door after an exhausting day. Maybe you chose a public setting to bring up a private grievance with a friend. That feeling of your words bouncing off an invisible wall is a classic sign that you missed the kairos. Conversely, think of a time you held your tongue against your initial impulse and waited. When you finally did speak, perhaps after a good night's sleep or during a calm walk, your message was received with openness and gratitude. That is the power of kairos in action. It teaches us that silence is not just the absence of noise, but an active, strategic waiting, a patient holding of your power until the moment is ripe for it to be truly effective. It's the understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, but only for now. This focus on timing and essence leads us to a subtle yet powerful communication habit that the Stoics would have us master, avoiding unnecessary explanations. In our desire to be understood, to be liked, or to avoid conflict, we often fall into the trap of over-explaining ourselves. We justify our decisions, elaborate on our reasons, and add layers of detail that nobody asked for. While this might feel thorough, the Stoic perspective reveals it as a drain on our energy and a potential weakening of our position. It often comes from a place of insecurity, a fear that our choices won't be accepted on their own merit, so we must build a fortress of words to defend them. The Stoic, grounded in their own virtue and clear judgment, feels no such need. Their speech, like their life, is focused on essence over elaboration. Marcus Aurelius offered a profound reminder that applies directly to this tendency. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This might seem morbid at first glance, but its purpose is to instill a sense of urgency and clarity. The reminder of life's brevity is a powerful filter for our actions and our words. If your time is limited and precious, does it make sense to waste it on long-winded justifications for things that require none? Does it serve your purpose to meticulously explain why you declined an invitation, why you chose a certain project, or why you hold a particular opinion to someone who may not truly care? This isn't about being rude or secretive. It's about understanding the immense value of your own energy and attention. every unnecessary word is a small withdrawal from your finite account of focus. Consider a common professional scenario. Your manager asks you to take on an additional task outside your normal responsibilities. You've assessed your workload and priorities, and you know you need to decline to maintain the quality of your core work. The insecure response is to over-explain. "I'm so sorry, I would love to, but I'm just swamped with the quarterly report, and my son has a recital tonight, and I'm already staying late, and I haven't even had lunch yet." This lengthy justification invites debate. It gives the manager multiple points to counter-offer on. They might say, "Well, could you just skip lunch?" Or, "What if we push the report?" You've now turned a simple decision into a negotiation about your personal life. The Stoic response, rooted in clarity and respect for your own boundaries, is simple and direct. "Thank you for thinking of me. I've reviewed my current priorities, and I won't be able to take that on without compromising my existing commitments." This statement is clear, professional, and requires no further defense. It explains the reason without apologizing for the decision. It stands on its own merit because you stand behind it. This principle transforms personal interactions as well. Imagine a friend pressures you to attend a social event you have no interest in. The temptation is to invent a complicated excuse or to list all the reasons you don't want to go, which only opens the door for them to try to solve your fabricated problems. The Stoic approach, honoring the brevity of life and the clarity of your own will, is to offer a gracious but simple no. "Thank you for the invitation. That sounds fun, but I won't be able to make it." If pressed, you can simply reiterate your decline without adding new layers of explanation. "I appreciate you asking, but I'm going to pass this time." This might feel uncomfortable at first because we are culturally conditioned to believe that a no requires a convincing reason. But true autonomy means your choices are valid because you've made them, not because you can articulate a bulletproof argument for them. Begin to notice your own conversations this week. Pay attention to the moments where you feel that internal tug to justify, to elaborate, to make sure the other person fully understands and approves of your reasoning. That feeling is your cue to practice Stoic economy of speech. Ask yourself, is this explanation necessary? Is it for my benefit or for theirs? Am I speaking from a place of confidence in my decision or from a fear of their judgment? By stripping away the unnecessary scaffolding from your speech, your core message becomes stronger and more authentic. You communicate that your decisions are thoughtful and deliberate, and you teach others to respect your boundaries by not offering them up for debate. You conserve your most valuable resource, your mental and emotional energy, for the conversations and actions that truly align with your purpose, making every word you do choose to speak carry far more weight and intention. This principle of thoughtful speech and knowing when to hold back extends powerfully into the realm of leadership, where strategic silence becomes not just a personal tool, but a multiplier of influence and trust. The Stoic ideal of a leader was not the loudest voice in the room, but the most composed and discerning one. They led not by commanding attention, but by earning respect through unwavering principle and measured action. Consider the Roman statesman Cato the Younger, a figure deeply admired by later Stoics for his ironclad integrity. Cato's power didn't come from fiery speeches. It emanated from his consistent actions and his refusal to engage in the petty political games and gossip that consumed his peers. He understood that his character was his most powerful message, and he communicated it more through what he chose not to do and not to say than through any grand pronouncement. By remaining silent where others would gossip and staying firm where others would compromise, he became a living symbol of Stoic virtue, inspiring others through the sheer force of his example rather than his demands. In a modern context, this translates to a leader who understands that their words carry immense weight and therefore uses them sparingly and with intention. A leader who is constantly talking, constantly micromanaging with verbal instructions, or immediately reacting to every problem with a proposed solution inadvertently creates a dependent and disempowered team. They signal that they alone have the answers, stifling creativity and critical thinking. Conversely, a leader who cultivates the art of strategic silence does something radical. They create space. In meetings, this might look like letting a silence hang after a question is posed, resisting the urge to immediately jump in and fill the void. This quiet pressure allows others to gather their thoughts and encourages more introverted team members to contribute, often leading to more diverse and innovative ideas than if the leader had spoken first. It communicates a powerful message. Your thoughts are valuable, and I am here to listen to them. This practice of intentional listening is perhaps the most underrated leadership superpower. When a leader truly listens with full attention, without interrupting, and without formulating a response while the other person is still talking, they do more than just gather information. They build an unshakable foundation of trust. An employee who feels genuinely heard feels valued and respected, which fosters loyalty and psychological safety far more effectively than any pep talk or bonus ever could. This Stoic approach to listening is an active, engaged silence. It's not a passive withdrawal. It's a focused effort to understand the complete message, including the concerns and emotions behind the words. A leader who masters this can diagnose the real issues within their team, not just the symptoms they present. Imagine a project team that has just missed a key deadline. The anxious energy in the room is palpable. An impulsive leader might launch immediately into a postmortem, assigning blame and dictating new, rushed procedures. This reaction, while perhaps well-intentioned, often amplifies the fear and shuts down honest communication. A leader applying Stoic principles would approach this differently. They might begin not with a lecture, but with a question followed by a purposeful, attentive silence. Talk to me. What were the biggest hurdles we faced? Then they would listen, really listen. They wouldn't interrupt to offer solutions or defend decisions. They would absorb the feedback, the frustrations, and the insights. This silent, receptive presence does two things immediately. It de-escalates the emotional charge of the situation, and it makes the team feel like partners in solving the problem rather than recipients of top-down criticism. The solution that eventually emerges from this collaborative silence will be more robust and have far greater buy-in than any directive handed down from on high. So, how could this practice of strategic silence make you a better leader, whether you're running a company, a community group, or simply guiding a family? It starts by redefining strength. Strength isn't about having the final word. It's about having the confidence to sometimes have no words at all, to be secure enough in your own authority that you don't need to constantly assert it. It's about understanding that your most impactful leadership moments may not be when you are speaking, but when you are creating the conditions for others to find their own voice and their own solutions. By choosing silence over reactive criticism, you build trust instead of resentment. By listening deeply instead of dictating, you unlock the collective intelligence of your team. And by embodying calm composure instead of chaotic reaction, you become the steady anchor that allows everyone around you to navigate the storm. Think about the last time anger or frustration completely took over. Your heart pounds, your face flushes, and the words are already forming on your tongue before your mind has even had a chance to catch up. In those heated moments, our speech becomes a weapon, and we often end up wounding the very relationships we value most. The Roman Stoic Seneca, who wrote extensively on the corrosive nature of anger, offered a brilliantly simple yet powerful piece of advice for these critical junctures: delay your response. He argued that the best remedy for anger is a postponement, advising us to grant a cooling-off period before we even consider speaking. This isn't about suppressing emotions in an unhealthy way. It's about recognizing that a mind flooded with strong feeling is incapable of rational thought or virtuous action. The Stoic goal is not to become emotionless, but to ensure our emotions don't become the master of our words. The ancient Stoics placed immense value on emotional regulation, but their perspective is often misunderstood. They didn't believe in eradicating feelings. Rather, they sought to understand them and prevent them from hijacking our better judgment. They saw unchecked emotional expression as a form of slavery, a state where we are controlled by external events and our own primal reactions. True freedom, in the Stoic sense, comes from the ability to pause between the feeling and the action, to insert a moment of conscious choice. When we speak from a place of raw, unprocessed anger or hurt, we are not expressing our true selves. We are merely venting a temporary storm that will pass, often leaving lasting damage in its wake. The virtue lies in weathering that storm internally first, so that what we eventually express is considered purposeful and aligned with our core values. So what does this look like in a real, tense situation? Imagine you're in a disagreement with your partner and you can feel your temper starting to flare. The conversation is escalating and you're both saying things you don't truly mean. The most powerful Stoic tactic you can employ in that very moment is to physically create space. This might mean politely saying, "I need a moment to collect my thoughts," and then walking into another room. This act is not running away from the problem. It is running toward a solution. It is a strategic retreat that allows your nervous system to calm down, your prefrontal cortex to re-engage, and your higher reasoning to come back online. By removing yourself from the immediate trigger, you break the cycle of reactive speech and give yourself the opportunity to respond from a place of calm rather than react from a place of chaos. This practice requires immense self-awareness and courage. It takes courage to hit the pause button in the middle of a conflict, because part of us wants to win the argument right then and there. But the Stoic asks a more important question. Do you want to win a momentary battle, or do you want to preserve the long-term health of the relationship? That 5-minute walk around the block can be the difference between a regrettable shouting match and a constructive, calm conversation that actually resolves the issue. It allows you to separate the core problem from the emotional noise, so you can address what's actually wrong instead of just attacking the person in front of you. Now take a moment for a little honest self-reflection. Can you recall a recent conversation where your words were purely emotion-driven? A time when hurt, jealousy, or outright anger took the wheel and steered the conversation straight off a cliff? What was the fallout? Often, the words we wish we could take back are spoken in these exact states of high emotion. That feeling of regret is a valuable teacher. It highlights the precise instant where Seneca's advice to delay could have changed the entire outcome. By learning to recognize the physical signs of that emotional surge, the clenched jaw, the quickened breath, you can start to install your own personal circuit breaker. You can train yourself to see the rising tide not as a cue to speak, but as a cue to retreat, reflect, and only then, perhaps, to respond. This leads us to a profound and often overlooked aspect of our speech, the sheer weight of the commitments we make with our words. Every time we give our word, we are essentially creating a tiny moral contract, a promise that binds our future actions to our present declarations. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who placed immense importance on personal integrity, spoke directly to this. He taught that our character is built not on grand gestures, but on the trustworthiness of our smallest promises. He warned against the carelessness of giving our assent or our word too readily, because to break a promise, even a seemingly minor one, is to damage our own virtue and erode the trust others place in us. It's a self-inflicted wound to our integrity. Think about the modern pace of life where we're constantly asked to commit. A colleague swings by your desk and asks, "Can you have a look at this report by tomorrow?" A friend texts, "Are you free to help me move on Saturday?" In the desire to be helpful, to avoid conflict, or simply to end the interaction quickly, the easiest word in the world to say tumbles out. Yes, we say it almost automatically without consulting our calendar, our energy levels, or our existing priorities. This impulsive yes is often a promise made to alleviate immediate social pressure, but it becomes a future obligation that we may lack the resources to fulfill. We overcommit, and in doing so, we set ourselves up for failure, stress, and the very real consequence of letting someone down. This is where strategic silence reveals its power not just as a shield, but as a tool for profound self-honesty and respect for others. The simple act of pausing before you answer a request for your time or energy is a direct application of Stoic discipline. That moment of silence is your sacred space to consult your inner ledger. It's where you ask yourself the crucial questions: do I truly have the capacity to do this well? Does this align with my current priorities? Am I saying yes because I want to, or because I feel obligated? This pause is the difference between a reactive commitment and a responsive one. It prevents you from making a promise your future self cannot keep. Imagine a typical work scenario. Your manager asks if you can lead a new, unexpected project. The autopilot response, driven by a desire to be seen as capable and eager, is to immediately agree. But the Stoic approach is to take a breath and create a moment of quiet. You might say, "That sounds like an important project. Let me just check my current deadlines and get back to you in an hour to confirm what I can take on." This response is not evasive, it is deeply responsible. It honors the request while respecting your own limits and your existing commitments to others. That silent space allows you to properly assess the true cost of the yes, ensuring that when you do give your word, it is ironclad. You transition from being a people pleaser to being a person of your word. The integrity of your speech is the foundation of your character. Every time you follow through on a promise, no matter how small, you deposit trust into your relational bank account. Conversely, every time you overcommit and underdeliver, you make a withdrawal. Silence before committing is the practice of ensuring your account always remains in the black. It's understanding that a thoughtful, delayed no is infinitely more virtuous than a rash, immediate yes that you may later break. This practice builds a reputation for reliability that speaks louder than any grandiose claim ever could. It teaches others that your word is not given lightly, but when it is absolutely dependable. This journey into the power of Stoic silence inevitably leads us inward to the quietest and most important conversation we will ever have, the one with ourselves. The external quiet we practice is never the final goal. It is the necessary condition for this internal dialogue to flourish. The Stoics were fervent believers in the practice of self-reflection, and they understood that a noisy, cluttered mind, constantly reacting to the outside world, could never achieve the clarity needed for true self-understanding. Marcus Aurelius, in the private pages of his Meditations, provided the ultimate example of this. He wrote, "You can commit injustice by doing nothing. Look within. Within is the fountain of good." His entire journal was a conversation with his own soul, a daily practice of examining his judgments, his impulses, and his actions against the unwavering standard of his virtues. He wasn't seeking answers from others. He was diligently mining them from the quiet depths of his own being. This practice of journaling, of literally conversing with oneself on paper, is where the discipline of assent and the power of the pause become tools for self-construction. When we sit in silence with a journal, we are forced to slow down the whirlwind of our thoughts. We catch those initial reactive impressions, the flash of anger from the morning's argument, the pang of envy from a friend's success, the anxiety about a future event, and we subject them to the Stoic test. We write them down and then we question them. Was my reaction justified? Is this thing I desire truly good or merely pleasant? Is this thing I fear truly within my control? This process transforms passive experience into active understanding. The journal becomes a mirror, reflecting back not who we wish we were, but who we actually are in our moments of choice, allowing us to course correct with intention. Reducing external noise is the fundamental prerequisite for this work. It is incredibly difficult to hear the subtle whispers of your own conscience when your attention is constantly fractured by notifications, chatter, and the endless demand to consume content. The constant intake of external stimuli leaves little room for internal processing. Strategic silence, therefore, is the act of clearing a space in your mental landscape. It's like turning off the loud machinery in a workshop so you can finally hear the delicate mechanism of your own watch ticking. In that newfound quiet, you can begin to distinguish your own voice from the cacophony of inherited opinions, social expectations, and cultural narratives that so often dictate our lives. You start to understand your own patterns, your triggers, your deeply held values, and the gaps between your aspirations and your actions. You can cultivate this with a simple, daily, quiet ritual. It doesn't require an hour of secluded meditation, though that is valuable. It can begin with just 5 minutes. This could look like sitting with your morning coffee in a silent room, without a phone or any other distraction. It might be a short walk without headphones, simply observing your surroundings and the thoughts that arise without judgment. The key is to create a protected space where you are not being spoken to, advertised to, or entertained. In this space, your mind is free to wander, to ponder, and eventually to settle. This daily appointment with silence is not about doing nothing. It's about doing the most important thing, tending to the state of your own soul. So, what might you learn about yourself in these silent moments? You might discover that a lot of your busyness is a distraction from a deeper uncertainty you've been avoiding. You might uncover that a recurring irritation with a loved one is less about their behavior and more about an unmet need or a personal insecurity of your own. You might find that a goal you've been relentlessly pursuing doesn't actually align with your core values. It was something you thought you should want, not something you truly do want. Silence has a way of dissolving the superficial and revealing the essential. It is in these uninterrupted stretches of time that your deepest intuitions can finally rise to the surface, offering guidance that is far wiser than any advice you could find externally. This is the ultimate gift of Stoic silence. It returns you to yourself, providing a solid internal foundation from which you can engage with the noisy world, not from a place of reaction, but from a place of profound and unshakable clarity. Just as we learn to value our own silence, Stoicism teaches us to extend that same respect to others, recognizing that their need for quiet is just as valid and necessary. This isn't about withdrawing or being cold. It's about practicing a profound form of empathy. The Stoics understood that constantly filling the air with words can be a form of intrusion, a way of imposing our own presence and needs onto someone else's inner world. True companionship, in many of the most difficult moments life offers, doesn't require a flood of advice or reassurance. Often, it simply requires our quiet, unwavering presence, a willingness to hold space without needing to fill it. Think about a time when someone was grieving a profound loss. The instinct to offer words of comfort is strong because we feel helpless in the face of their pain. We want to fix it, to make it better with our language, but the most impactful support is often not found in what we say, but in our ability to sit in silence alongside them. Your silent presence communicates that their grief is valid, that it doesn't need to be sanitized or explained away with platitudes. It says, "I am here with you in this, and I am strong enough to withstand this silence with you." This shared quiet becomes a sanctuary where they can process their emotions without the pressure to perform or respond. You are offering the gift of allowing them to simply be, in whatever state they are in, without judgment or interruption. This principle extends far beyond grief into our everyday interactions. A colleague might be wrestling with a difficult problem, and our impulse is to immediately offer a solution the moment we see their furrowed brow. But by jumping in with unsolicited advice, we might be interrupting their deep thought process. Imposing speech in that moment can feel like someone turning on a bright light in a dark room you are using to focus. The Stoic approach is to observe, to read the situation, and to offer help only when it's clear it's wanted. Sometimes, the most supportive thing you can do is to continue working quietly alongside them, making it known you are available if needed, but respecting their cognitive space. This demonstrates trust in their capability to work through their own challenges. The value of this wordless companionship is a recurring theme in Stoic thought. It aligns with the virtue of justice, giving others what they are due, which in many cases is the dignity of their own emotional process. It also practices the discipline of action, ensuring that what we do or don't do is truly beneficial for the other person, not just a way to alleviate our own discomfort with their silence. By learning to be comfortably silent with others, we build deeper, more trusting relationships. We show that we are attuned to them not for the conversation we can extract, but for the human connection we can share, which sometimes exists most powerfully beyond words. Consider your own relationships for a moment. Can you recall a time when someone's silent support meant more to you than any words could have? Perhaps it was a friend who simply sat with you after a tough day, or a partner who knew not to ask questions but just to be there. That feeling of being understood without having to explain yourself is incredibly powerful. Now flip the perspective. When was the last time you offered that same gift to someone else? Did you sense their need for quiet and honor it, or did you feel an anxiety that compelled you to speak? Learning to discern when to offer silent support is like developing a new sense. It's the ability to listen to the silence itself and understand what it truly requires. This brings us to a crucial application of Stoic silence that moves beyond interpersonal communication and into the very heart of our own judgment, the role of stillness in making clear, confident decisions. In our fast-paced world, we're often pressured to decide quickly, to trust our gut in an instant, and to keep moving forward without looking back. But the Stoics understood that the most reliable decisions are rarely born from a place of noise and haste. They emerge from a foundation of inner quiet. Seneca, in his essay on the shortness of life, offered a powerful prescription for this very challenge. He wrote, "You must retreat into yourself as much as you can, associate with people who are likely to improve you, and welcome those whom you are capable of improving." The process is mutual, for people learn while they teach. This retreat he speaks of isn't about running away from life's responsibilities. It's a strategic withdrawal into a space of mental clarity, where the shouting of external pressures and the whispering of our own anxieties can finally fade, allowing us to hear the clear voice of our own reasoned judgment. Rash decisions are almost always the product of what we might call noisy thinking. This noise can take many forms: the frantic chatter of competing opinions from everyone around us, the internal static of our fears about potential outcomes, or the relentless background hum of distraction that prevents us from focusing on the core variables of a choice. When our mental landscape is cluttered with this kind of interference, we are essentially trying to read a compass during an earthquake. The needle is swinging wildly, and we can't get a stable reading. We might make a choice based on a temporary emotion like fear of missing out, or a desire to please others, or simply to end the uncomfortable feeling of uncertainty. These decisions, made in a storm, are far more likely to lead us off course and into regret. The discipline of Stoic silence is the practice of calming that earthquake, of creating a moment of profound stillness so we can see which way the needle is truly pointing. Consider a significant professional crossroads. Imagine you've been offered a new job. It comes with a higher salary and a more impressive title, but it would require relocating your family and stepping into a corporate culture you're unsure about. The noise begins immediately. Your family has mixed feelings, your current employer makes a counteroffer, your friends offer congratulatory but conflicting advice, and your own mind races with visions of success and anxiety about failure. The noisy, reactive response is to get swept up in the excitement and say yes, or to get paralyzed by the fear and say no, all without ever truly consulting your deepest values. The Stoic approach is to consciously create a period of deliberate silence before you give your answer. This might mean taking a full day to yourself, turning off your phone, and going for a long walk in nature without any agenda other than to think. It's in that intentional quiet that the peripheral noise starts to lose its power. You can begin to separate the allure of the external rewards, the salary, the title, from the internal costs and alignments. Does this path resonate with your core definition of a good life? Does it allow you to practice the virtues you hold most dear? The answer often doesn't shout, it whispers. And you can only hear it when everything else is quiet. You can apply this same principle to smaller, everyday decisions with equally powerful results. Before making a significant purchase, instead of immediately researching endless reviews and asking for everyone's opinion, try sitting in silence for just 5 minutes. Ask yourself not just if you want the item, but why. Is this purchase serving a genuine need, or is it an attempt to fill an emotional void? That moment of quiet reflection can save you from financial strain and the clutter of unnecessary possessions. The same practice applies to how you schedule your time. Before automatically saying yes to another social commitment, pause. In the silence, check in with your energy levels and your true desires. Are you agreeing out of a sense of obligation, or does this commitment genuinely align with your goals for connection and rest? This simple act of consulting your inner compass before speaking your answer is a form of profound self-respect. So, as you move through your week, I invite you to view your upcoming decisions, both large and small, as opportunities to practice this Stoic art. Before you feel compelled to give an immediate answer, grant yourself the gift of a pause. It doesn't have to be a day-long retreat. Even 30 seconds of closed-eyed breathing can create enough space to shift from a reactive mode to a responsive one. In that silence, ask yourself the deeper questions that cut through the noise. Is this choice in alignment with my character? Is it truly within my control to make this outcome successful? Will this decision promote my peace of mind, or will it add to my anxiety? By making this silent deliberation a non-negotiable step in your process, you stop being a pinball bounced around by external forces and start becoming the deliberate architect of your own life, building it one conscious, quiet choice at a time. This principle of thoughtful decision-making leads us directly to a concept the Stoics would consider absolutely fundamental, not just to our actions but to our very speech, the idea of economy. We often think of frugality in terms of money or resources, but the Stoics applied this virtue of economy to every aspect of life, especially our words. They viewed speech as a precious currency, not to be hoarded, but to be spent with immense intention and care. Just as a wise person does not frivolously waste their savings on trivialities, a wise communicator does not fritter away their words on unnecessary explanations, repetitive chatter, or hollow pleasantries. Every sentence should carry weight and purpose because each one expends a piece of your finite energy and attention. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, was famously a man of few words, and his successor, Cleans, deeply embodied this value of concise communication. It was said of Cleans that his speeches were so powerful and compact that they could be compared to the intense, focused energy of a tightly closed fist, every word delivered with purpose and impact. This stands in stark contrast to the loose, open-handed style of speaking that scatters meaning and dilutes intention. The Stoics believed that brevity is not just a stylistic choice, it is a moral discipline. It forces clarity of thought, respects the time and attention of the listener, and ensures that your verbal currency retains its value. When you speak sparingly, people learn to lean in and listen because they know your words will be worth hearing. We can see the profound wisdom of this in our modern professional environments. Consider the all-too-common experience of the redundant meeting. How many hours are wasted each week in conversations that spiral in circles, dominated by individuals who speak at length to say very little? The person who practices Stoic economy of words enters that same meeting with a different mindset. They have already distilled their thoughts to their essence. When they contribute, it is to offer a clear summary, pose a pivotal question that redirects the conversation to its core objective, or present a concise solution. They understand that adding more words to a confused situation rarely brings clarity. Often, it is the carefully chosen few words that cut through the noise and illuminate the path forward. This same principle applies powerfully to our written communication. The world is flooded with emails that are paragraphs longer than they need to be, filled with preambles, unnecessary justifications, and vague language that obscures the central request or idea. A Stoic approach to email would be a practice in ruthless editing. Before hitting send, you would pause to ask, what is the single most important thing I need to communicate here? Is every sentence in this message serving that goal? You might find that a 5-sentence email can be effectively distilled into 2. This isn't about being curt or impersonal. It's about honoring the recipient's time and cognitive load. A concise, well-structured email is an act of professional respect. It demonstrates that you have done the hard work of refining your thoughts so that they don't have to. Start to bring this practice into your own life by becoming an observer of your own verbal habits. In your next conversation, notice the impulse to over-explain a simple point or to fill a comfortable silence with chatter. That moment of awareness is your cue to practice frugality. Before speaking, perform a quick mental audit. Is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it kind, and perhaps most importantly, is it the most concise and clear way to express this idea? You will begin to find that this discipline of economy does not make you less communicative, it makes you more powerful. Your words become like precision tools instead of blunt instruments, capable of building understanding and driving action with far greater efficiency. You conserve not only your own energy but also the collective attention of everyone you engage with, creating a ripple effect of clarity and purpose in a world drowning in unnecessary noise. But this powerful tool of strategic silence carries with it a profound ethical weight, because there are moments when choosing to say nothing is not an act of strength but a form of consent. The Stoics were deeply concerned with living a virtuous life, and virtue requires action just as much as it requires restraint. Epictetus, in his teachings, drew a crucial distinction between withholding assent from a misleading impression and failing to give your clear assent to a known truth. He emphasized that our rational faculty is not just for private judgment, it is our guide to right action in the world. Remaining silent in the face of falsehood or injustice can, in certain contexts, be interpreted as agreement. It can allow harm to continue unchecked, making our quiet observation a passive endorsement of the wrongdoing. This creates a critical tension at the heart of Stoic practice. We are to master our reactions and avoid futile battles over things outside our control. Yet we are also called to act with justice and courage in the world we share with others. The key to resolving this lies in discernment, in understanding the difference between a personal provocation that is best met with silence and a broader injustice that demands our voice. If someone insults you personally, your silent refusal to engage protects your peace. But if you witness someone else being bullied, harassed, or treated unjustly, your silence is no longer a shield for your own mind. It becomes a curtain drawn around the victim, isolating them and empowering the wrongdoer. In the first case, the event is a test of your emotional discipline. In the second, it is a test of your moral character. Imagine you are in a workplace meeting and a colleague presents an idea that was actually originally proposed by a more junior, absent team member. The original contributor is not there to speak for themselves. The person now presenting it is implying it is their own. Do you say nothing, avoiding a potentially awkward public confrontation? Or do you gently interject to clarify the idea's origin, ensuring proper credit is given? The Stoic, committed to justice, would find their voice in this moment. The response wouldn't need to be an accusation. It could be a simple matter-of-fact clarification. That's an excellent point, and it reminds me of the proposal Sarah shared last week. I think building on her framework here could be really powerful. This statement is not reactive or emotional. It is a corrective action rooted in fairness. It speaks up without tearing down, aligning action with virtue. Epictetus warned against the danger of failing to declare our judgments when it matters. To see a truth that an idea is stolen, that a statement is bigoted, that an action is cruel, and to consciously choose silence is to betray our own reason. Our inner conviction and our outward action become disconnected, creating a conflict that erodes our integrity. This is where silence crosses the line from a strategic pause into complicity. It is the difference between controlling what you can, your own voluntary action for good, and surrendering to what you believe you cannot control, the potential social fallout of speaking up. The Stoic argues that your integrity is always within your control, and preserving it is the highest good. So, when does silence become complicity? It happens when our desire for personal peace overrides our duty to justice. It occurs when we value social comfort over moral courage. The litmus test is not whether speaking up will be easy or immediately effective, but whether it is the right and virtuous thing to do. Your voice may not single-handedly stop the injustice, but it signals to the victim that they are not alone, and it signals to the perpetrator that their behavior is not universally accepted. It maintains your own moral consistency, ensuring that your inner commitment to virtue is reflected in your outer actions. This doesn't mean you must charge into every battle. It means you must thoughtfully choose which battles are worth your voice, recognizing that some silences speak volumes, and what they say might be something you never intended to agree with. Now let's turn to a challenge we all face: the subtle yet powerful pressure to speak in social settings. Whether it's a networking event, a family gathering, or even a casual dinner with friends, there's often an unspoken expectation to contribute, to be entertaining, to fill every silence with words. In these moments, it can feel like staying quiet is awkward or rude, as if silence itself is a social failure. But the Stoics invite us to reframe this entirely. They remind us that our primary duty isn't to conform to external expectations. It's to live with integrity, to act in accordance with our nature as rational beings. This means valuing the quality of your presence over the quantity of your words. You are not obligated to perform or entertain. Your worth in a social setting isn't measured by how much you say, but by the authenticity and attention you bring to the moment. Marcus Aurelius offers profound guidance for navigating this exact challenge. He wrote in his Meditations, "Let not your mind be run off its feet by the whirl of external happenings." Don't let them toss you here and there. This is a powerful image, the idea of being tossed about by external opinions and social pressures like a small boat in a storm. The pressure to speak, to offer an opinion on everything, to align yourself with the popular view, is one of those external happenings. It's a whirlwind that can pull you away from your center. Aurelius is urging you to drop anchor in your own values. When you feel that social anxiety rising, that urge to say something, anything, just to avoid silence, remember that you have a choice. You are not required to be swept away by the collective energy of the room. Your anchor is your commitment to acting with reason and virtue, not with blind conformity. So what does this look like in practice? How do you actually embrace comfortable silence in a group without feeling like you're failing socially? It begins with a shift in mindset. Instead of viewing silence as an empty space that needs to be filled, see it as a space of observation and connection. You can be fully present and engaged without saying a word. Non-verbal communication, a genuine smile, attentive eye contact, a nod of understanding can often convey warmth and connection more effectively than forced conversation. Your calm, composed presence can actually become a stabilizing force in a group, giving others permission to also relax and let the conversation breathe, rather than rushing to fill every gap. Another practical tactic is to become a masterful listener. In many social situations, the person who listens deeply is far more valued than the person who talks incessantly. When you truly listen, you give the speaker the gift of feeling heard and understood. This is an active, generous form of participation that requires no words from you. You can ask thoughtful, open-ended questions that encourage others to elaborate, which not only takes the pressure off you to speak, but also often leads to more meaningful and interesting conversations than small talk ever could. Your silence becomes a tool for drawing others out, for creating depth. This transforms the experience from one of social anxiety into one of genuine curiosity and connection. Finally, it's helpful to prepare a few gentle, graceful ways to handle moments when the silence feels pointed or when you're directly put on the spot. If someone asks for your opinion on a topic you haven't fully formed a thought on, it's perfectly acceptable to say, "That's an interesting question. I'm still thinking that through, actually," or "I'd love to hear more about what you think first." These are not evasions. They are honest responses that honor your own process and prevent you from saying something merely for the sake of saying something. They are applications of the Stoic pause in a social context. I want to invite you to reflect on your own social habits this week. Pay attention to those moments where you feel that internal pressure to speak. What triggers it? Is it a fear of being seen as boring? A worry that you'll be judged for being quiet? Observe what happens if you consciously resist that impulse just once. Choose to listen instead. Choose to offer a smile instead of a comment. See if the world actually ends, or if, perhaps, you find the interaction becomes more authentic and less exhausting. You might discover that the pressure was mostly coming from inside your own mind. and that by releasing it, you not only conserve your own energy, but also bring a more grounded, genuine version of yourself into the room. Within Stoic philosophy, the highest ideal to aspire toward is the figure of the sage, a person who has achieved perfect wisdom and lives in complete harmony with nature and virtue. While this ideal is considered ultimately unattainable, it serves as a guiding star, a model for how to continuously improve our own character. And one of the most defining characteristics of this Stoic sage is a profound and purposeful relationship with speech. The sage understands that words are not merely sounds we make, they are extensions of our character, and thus they must be treated with the same care and intention as any other action. This individual speaks only when it is necessary to do so, and when they do, their words are measured, true, and beneficial. They have mastered the art of ensuring their speech does not outpace their thought. We can look to history for powerful examples of this virtue in action, even if these figures were not perfect sages themselves. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, despite holding the most powerful position in the known world, constantly counseled himself in his private journal against idle talk and gossip. His meditations are filled with reminders to avoid chattering about what other people are doing and to focus instead on his own duties and judgments. Another profound example is Cato the Younger, a Roman senator known for his unshakable integrity. Cato's power did not come from long, fiery speeches in the Senate, but from his unwavering principles and his refusal to engage in the deceitful and frivolous talk that was common in politics. His silence was not weakness, it was a formidable strength that commanded respect because it signaled a mind that was not easily swayed by popular opinion or petty intrigue. This model of the sage inspires our practical silence by giving us a tangible standard to measure ourselves against. It's not about never speaking, it's about elevating the quality and intention behind every word we choose to say. Imagine a mentor you deeply respect, someone whose advice you truly value. Consider how they communicate. They likely don't offer opinions on every trivial matter. They don't interrupt, they listen intently, process what is said, and when they finally speak, their words carry weight because they are clearly the product of careful consideration. They aren't speaking to hear their own voice or to prove their intelligence. They are speaking to add genuine value to the conversation. This is the practical application of the sage silence. It's the understanding that your most powerful contributions often come from the words you withhold until the perfect moment. Think about the last time you were in a meeting or a group discussion where one person remained quiet for most of the time. At first, you might not have even noticed them, but then, as the conversation hit a point of confusion or conflict, that same quiet person offered a single, insightful sentence that completely reframed the issue and provided a clear path forward. In that moment, their silence beforehand made their words infinitely more powerful. Their contribution had impact precisely because it wasn't diluted by a constant stream of less considered commentary. They embodied the Stoic ideal. Their silence was active and purposeful, a period of intense listening and processing that allowed them to deliver a gem of clarity when it was most needed. Aspiring to this thoughtful speech is a daily practice of aligning our words with our virtues. It means pausing before we contribute to ask ourselves a few simple but profound questions. Is what I am about to say true? Is it necessary for the situation at hand? Is it a kind and constructive thing to say? This three-part filter, often attributed to Socrates, is a practical tool for channeling the spirit of the Stoic sage. If your intended statement fails any one of these tests, the virtuous choice is often to hold your peace. This isn't about self-censorship in a negative way, it's about conscious curation of your character. Every time you choose not to gossip, not to complain needlessly, or not to offer an uneducated opinion, you are actively sculpting yourself into a person of greater integrity and wisdom. You are declaring that your speech will be a reflection of your best self, not a reaction to every passing impulse. So, as we've explored, the practice of Stoic silence is woven from several essential threads. It begins with discernment, the ability to pause and separate our initial, raw impressions from the deeper truth of a situation. It's fueled by emotional control, that vital skill of letting the storm of feeling pass through us without letting it dictate our words. It's guided by a keen sense of timing, understanding that the right thing said at the wrong moment can do more harm than good. And above all, it's directed by a clear sense of purpose, ensuring that every time we choose to speak, our words are aimed at something constructive, true, and within our sphere of influence. This isn't a passive withdrawal from life. It is an intensely active practice of self-command, a conscious decision to engage with the world from a place of strength rather than react to it from a place of impulse. The Roman philosopher Seneca, whose wisdom has guided us throughout this discussion, captured the ultimate power of this practice with stunning clarity. He wrote, "A great fortune is a great slavery, but so is a great tongue." For Seneca, the person who feels compelled to constantly speak, to have an opinion on everything, and to fill every silence is as much a slave as someone in chains. They are enslaved to the expectations of others, to the need for validation, and to their own unchecked impulses. True freedom, in the Stoic sense, is found in the mastery of that great tongue, in the ability to choose quiet when it serves virtue, and to choose words that are as precise and powerful as a well-aimed arrow. Your words are a finite resource. Investing them wisely is how you build a life of integrity and impact. This might all feel like a lot to take in, so I want to leave you with a simple, actionable challenge. Don't try to master this all at once. For the next week, I encourage you to pick just one strategy from this video and practice it with intention. Maybe it's the simple pause, taking one deep breath before you respond to a message or a comment. Perhaps it's the controlled check, asking yourself if what you're about to say is aimed at something within your power. It could be the commitment to listen fully in one conversation each day, without planning your reply while the other person is still talking. Choose one and observe the subtle shift it creates in your interactions and your inner peace. Real change is built through consistent, small actions, not grand, sweeping gestures. If you found this exploration of Stoic wisdom valuable, and you're interested in bringing more clarity and calm into your daily life, consider subscribing to the channel. We delve into practical philosophy every week, turning ancient insights into modern tools for living well, and I would genuinely love to hear about your experiences. Which strategy did you try? What did you discover in the space between impulse and response? Your stories and insights in the comments below help build a wonderful community of practice where we can all learn from each other. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can add to any situation is a moment of purposeful, peaceful